Imagine this. You're sitting in a room filled with people, friends, colleagues, perhaps even strangers. The air buzzes with conversation, laughter, and the occasional clink of glasses. Everyone seems to be contributing, sharing stories, opinions, and ideas. But you're silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've convinced yourself that your voice doesn't matter. Or worse, that it's safer to stay quiet. You tell yourself you're listening, observing, being the calm in the storm. But deep down there's a gnawing unease, a faint whisper that grows louder with every passing moment. What if your silence is costing you more than you realize? Now, imagine this silence stretching beyond that room. It follows you to work, where you hesitate to speak up in meetings, even when you know your idea could change everything. It lingers in your relationships, where you swallow your feelings instead of expressing them, fearing conflict or rejection. It shadows your dreams, where you downplay your ambitions, telling yourself you're not ready, not good enough, not worthy of being heard. Over time, this silence becomes a part of you, a quiet companion that feels safe, familiar, even comforting. But here's the unsettling truth. Silence is not neutral. It is not passive. It is a force, a choice, a language of its own, and it speaks volumes, even when you don't. This is the paradox of being too quiet. In your effort to avoid discomfort, you create a different kind of pain, one that is slower, subtler, but far more corrosive. You become a ghost in your own life, present but unseen, heard but not truly listened to, and the world moves on without you, not because it doesn't care, but because it doesn't know you're there. But why does this happen? Why do so many of us choose silence over speech, invisibility over visibility? Is it fear? Shame? A misguided belief that our words hold no weight? Or is it something deeper, something woven into the fabric of our psyche, our culture, our very understanding of what it means to exist? Consider this. Silence is often praised as a virtue. We're told to think before we speak, to listen more, talk less, to be humble. And there's truth in that. Silence can be powerful, a space for reflection, for growth, for connection. But what happens when silence becomes a habit, a shield, a prison? What happens when it stops being a choice and starts being a default? This is the great question we must confront. What are the consequences of being too quiet? Not just the obvious ones, the missed opportunities, the unspoken words, the stifled potential, but the deeper, more insidious effects. The way it erodes your sense of self, the way it shapes how others see you, treat you, value you, the way it quietly, relentlessly, reshapes your reality. And here's the most unsettling part. You might not even notice it happening. Silence has a way of creeping into your life, one unspoken word at a time, until one day you wake up and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. Your voice feels foreign, your thoughts feel small, and your presence feels inconsequential. You wonder how you got here, how you let this happen, but the answer is simple. You didn't let it happen. You allowed it. So let me ask you this. What is your silence costing you? What dreams have you buried under the weight of unspoken words? What parts of yourself have you hidden away, convinced they're not worth sharing? And most importantly, what would happen if you stopped being quiet, if you dared to speak, to be seen, to take up space? These are not easy questions to answer. They require courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about who you are and who you've become. But here's the thing, the answers are already within you, waiting to be uncovered. All you have to do is break the silence. And yet, breaking the silence is not as simple as it sounds. It's not just about speaking up. It's about understanding why you stayed quiet in the first place. It's about unraveling the psychological and philosophical forces that have shaped your relationship with silence. Forces that are as old as humanity itself. Forces that are as old as humanity itself. This is where our journey begins, not with answers, but with questions, not with solutions, but with exploration. Because the downside of being too quiet is not just about what you lose, it's about what you never allow yourself to find. So let's dive deeper. Let's uncover the hidden problem, the roots of this silence, and the unseen consequences it carries. Let's confront the uncomfortable truths and challenge the assumptions that keep us trapped. And let's discover what it truly means to break free, not just from silence but from the limitations we've placed on ourselves. The first step is to understand why we stay quiet in the first place. And that, as you'll soon see, is a story as complex as it is revealing. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is a language, a choice, a reflection of our deepest fears and desires. To understand why we stay quiet, why we retreat into the safety of silence, we must first confront the psychological and philosophical forces that shape this behavior. These forces are not arbitrary. They are rooted in the very fabric of human existence, shaped by centuries of cultural conditioning, evolutionary biology, and existential inquiry. Let's begin with the most immediate force: fear. Fear is the silent architect of our silence. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of failure. These fears are not irrational. They are primal, etched into our psyche by millennia of evolution. In the early days of humanity, being ostracized from the tribe could mean death. Survival depended on conformity, on blending in, on not rocking the boat. And so, we learned to silence ourselves, to prioritize safety over self-expression. But here's the paradox. While this fear once served a purpose, it has become a prison. In the modern world, the stakes are different. We are no longer at risk of being cast out into the wilderness, yet our brains still operate as though we are. We silence ourselves not because it's necessary, but because it's familiar. And in doing so, we trade the possibility of connection, growth, and fulfillment for the illusion of safety. This brings us to the psychological roots of silence. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist, spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we repress, deny, or hide from the world. According to Jung, the shadow is not inherently negative. It is simply the parts of us that we deem unacceptable, whether due to societal conditioning or personal insecurities. And what happens to these repressed parts? They don't disappear. They fester. They manifest as anxiety, self-doubt, and a pervasive sense of inadequacy. When we stay quiet, we are not just hiding our words, we are hiding our shadow. We are burying our true selves under layers of silence, convinced that if we reveal who we really are, we will be rejected. But here's the tragic irony. In our effort to avoid rejection, we reject ourselves. We become complicit in our own erasure, trading authenticity for approval. This is where philosophy enters the conversation. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher known for his exploration of human nature and morality, once wrote, "Silence is worse. All truths that are kept silent become poisonous." Nietzsche understood that silence is not a passive state, it is an active force, one that distorts our perception of reality and corrodes our sense of self. When we stay quiet, we are not just withholding our words, we are withholding our truth. And in doing so, we create a rift between who we are and who we present to the world. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, took this idea even further. In his view, silence is a form of bad faith, a refusal to take responsibility for our own existence. Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, that we have no choice but to create ourselves through our actions and choices. But when we stay quiet, we are abdicating that responsibility. We are allowing others to define us, to shape our reality, to dictate our worth. And then, there is Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who argued that meaning is the primary motivator of human behavior. In his seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Silence, in this context, is a refusal to occupy that space. It is a surrender of our power, a denial of our ability to shape our own narrative. But why do we do this? Why do we surrender our power, our voice, our truth? The answer lies in a combination of cognitive biases and cultural conditioning. Take, for example, the spotlight effect, the tendency to believe that others are paying more attention to us than they actually are. This bias amplifies our fear of judgment, making us hyper-aware of every word, every gesture, every potential misstep. It convinces us that silence is safer, that it's better to say nothing than to risk saying the wrong thing. Then there is social comparison theory, which suggests that we evaluate our own worth based on how we measure up to others. In a world that glorifies extroversion, confidence, and assertiveness, those of us who are naturally quiet often feel inadequate. We compare ourselves to the loudest voices in the room and conclude that we have nothing of value to contribute. And so, we stay silent, not because we have nothing to say, but because we've convinced ourselves that our words don't matter. But perhaps the most insidious force at play is cultural conditioning. From a young age, many of us are taught to be polite, to avoid conflict, to prioritize harmony over honesty. These lessons are not inherently wrong, but they can become toxic when taken to extremes. When we internalize the belief that our worth is tied to our ability to keep the peace, we learn to silence ourselves in the name of propriety. We become people pleasers, sacrificing our authenticity on the altar of social acceptance. And so we arrive at the heart of the problem. Silence is not just a personal choice. It is a cultural phenomenon, a psychological defense mechanism, a philosophical dilemma. It is a reflection of our deepest fears and our most profound desires. It is a way of navigating a world that often feels overwhelming, uncertain, and unforgiving. But here's the question we must ourselves. Is it worth it? Is the safety of silence worth the cost of our authenticity, our connection, our freedom? And if not, how do we break free? The answers to these questions are not simple, but they are essential, because the downside of being too quiet is not just about what we lose, it's about what we never allow ourselves to become. Silence is a slow-acting poison. It doesn't announce its presence with dramatic flair or immediate pain. Instead, it seeps into the cracks of your life, unnoticed and challenged, until one day you wake up and realize something vital has been eroded. The consequences of being too quiet are not always visible on the surface. They operate in the shadows, shaping your reality in ways you might not even recognize until it's too late. Let's start with the most personal consequence, the erosion of self. When you stay quiet, you are not just withholding your words, you are withholding your essence. Every unspoken thought, every stifled emotion, every suppressed idea is a piece of yourself that you deny the world. And, more importantly, that you deny yourself. Over time, this self-censorship becomes a form of self-erasure. You begin to lose touch with who you are, what you want, and what you believe. Your identity becomes fragmented, a patchwork of half-truths and unexpressed desires. This fragmentation has a name in psychology: cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort that arises when your actions, or inactions, conflict with your beliefs or values. When you stay quiet, you are essentially telling yourself that your thoughts and feelings don't matter. But deep down you know they do. And so, a war breaks out within you. A war between the person you are and the person you present to the world. This internal conflict is exhausting, draining your energy and clouding your clarity. It's why so many quiet people feel a pervasive sense of emptiness, even when their lives appear fine on the surface. But the consequences don't stop there. Silence also shapes how others perceive and treat you. Humans are social creatures. We rely on cues, verbal and nonverbal, to understand one another. When you stay quiet, you send a message, whether you intend to or not. That message might be interpreted as indifference, insecurity, or even arrogance. People fill in the gaps of your silence with their own assumptions, and those assumptions often have little to do with who you really are. Consider the workplace, for example. In meetings, the loudest voices often dominate the conversation, even if their ideas aren't the best. Meanwhile, the quiet ones, the thinkers, the observers, the ones who might have groundbreaking insights, are overlooked. This isn't because their ideas lack value. It's because their silence is misinterpreted as a lack of confidence or competence. Over time, this dynamic can have serious professional consequences. You might be passed over for promotions, excluded from important projects, or simply underestimated. And the more this happens, the more it reinforces your belief that speaking up isn't worth the risk. In relationships, the consequences are equally profound. Silence can create distance, even between people who care deeply about each other. When you don't express your needs, your boundaries, or your feelings, you leave room for misunderstanding and resentment to grow. Your partner, your friends, your family, they can't read your mind. They can only respond to what you show them. And if what you show them is silence, they may assume everything is fine, even when it's not. Over time, this dynamic can erode trust and intimacy, leaving you feeling isolated and unseen. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of silence is its impact on your sense of agency. Agency is the belief that you have control over your life, that your actions matter, that you can shape your own destiny. When you stay quiet, you are essentially surrendering that agency. You are allowing others to dictate the terms of your existence, to define your worth, to shape your reality. And the more you do this, the smaller you become. Your world shrinks, not because it has to, but because you've convinced yourself it's safer that way. This brings us to the neurological dimension of silence. Research in neuroscience has shown that our brains are wired for connection. When we speak, when we share our thoughts and feelings, we activate the brain's reward system, releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine and oxytocin that make us feel good. But when we stay silent, we deny ourselves this natural source of fulfillment. Over time, this can lead to a kind of emotional starvation, a sense of disconnection not just from others, but from ourselves. And then there's the societal dimension. Silence is not just a personal choice, it's a cultural phenomenon. In many societies, certain groups, women, minorities, introverts, are socialized to be quiet, to prioritize the comfort of others over their own needs. This cultural conditioning creates a feedback loop. The more these groups stay silent, the more their silence is normalized, and the harder it becomes to break the cycle. The result is a society that privileges certain voices over others, perpetuating inequality and stifling progress. But here's the most unsettling truth. The consequences of silence are not inevitable. They are not a fixed part of the human experience. They are the result of choices we make every day, often without realizing it. And if we can change those choices, we can change the consequences. This is where the journey gets difficult, and where it gets interesting, because breaking free from silence is not just about speaking up, it's about reclaiming your power, your voice, your truth. It's about confronting the fears and beliefs that have kept you quiet and rewriting the narrative of your life. But how do we do that? How do we break free from the trap of silence and step into the fullness of who we are? The answer lies in rebellion, a radical shift in perspective that challenges everything we thought we knew about silence, safety, and self-expression. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of silence is its impact on your sense of agency. Agency is the belief that you have control over your life, that your actions matter, that you can shape your own destiny. When you stay quiet, you are essentially surrendering that agency. You are allowing others to dictate the terms of your existence, to define your worth, to shape your reality. And the more you do this, the smaller you become. Your world shrinks, not because it has to, but because you've convinced yourself it's safer that way. Rebellion is not always loud. It doesn't always involve grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, rebellion is quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible. It's the decision to speak when you'd rather stay silent. It's the choice to take up space when you've been taught to shrink. It's the act of reclaiming your voice, your power, your truth, not for the sake of others, but for yourself. Breaking free from the trap of, but for yourself. Breaking free from the trap of silence begins with a single radical realization. Your voice matters, not because it's perfect or profound or universally accepted, but because it's yours. It's an expression of your unique perspective, your lived experience, your humanity. And in a world that thrives on conformity, your voice is a revolutionary act. But how do you get there? How do you move from silence to speech, from invisibility to visibility, from self-erasure to self-expression? The journey is not linear, and it's not easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the fears and beliefs that have kept you quiet. Let's explore the steps. Step 1. Uncover the roots of your silence before you can break free. You must understand what's holding you back. This requires deep introspection, a willingness to confront the fears and beliefs that have shaped your relationship with silence. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I speak up? What beliefs do I hold about my voice and its value? Where did these fears and beliefs come from? For many, the roots of silence lie in childhood. Perhaps you were taught to be seen and not heard, or you were punished for expressing your emotions. Maybe you learned early on that your needs were less important than the needs of others. These experiences shape your subconscious beliefs about speaking up, and they don't disappear just because you grow up. The work here is to identify and challenge these beliefs. For example, if you believe that your voice doesn't matter, ask yourself, is this really true? Has there ever been a time when your words made a difference, even in a small way? If you believe that speaking up will lead to conflict or rejection, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And more importantly, what's the cost of staying silent? But perhaps the most insidious consequence of silence is its impact on your sense of agency. Agency is the belief that you have control over your life, that your actions matter, that you can shape your own destiny. When you stay quiet, you are essentially surrendering that agency. You are allowing others to dictate the terms of your existence, to define your worth, to shape your reality. And the more you do this, the smaller you become. Your world shrinks, not because it has to, but because you've convinced yourself it's safer that way. Rebellion is not always loud. It doesn't always involve grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, rebellion is quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible. It's the decision to speak when you'd rather stay silent. It's the choice to take up space when you've been taught to shrink. It's the act of reclaiming your voice, your power, your truth, not for the sake of others, but for yourself. Breaking free from the trap of, but for yourself. Breaking free from the trap of, silence begins with a single radical realization. Your voice matters, not because it's perfect or profound or universally accepted, but because it's yours. It's an expression of your unique perspective, your lived experience, your humanity. And in a world that thrives on conformity, your voice is a revolutionary act. But how do you get there? How do you move from silence to speech, from invisibility to visibility, from self-erasure to self-expression? The journey is not linear, and it's not easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the fears and beliefs that have kept you quiet. Let's explore the steps. Step 1. Uncover the roots of your silence before you can break free. You must understand what's holding you back. This requires deep introspection, a willingness to confront the fears and beliefs that have shaped your relationship with silence. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I speak up? What beliefs do I hold about my voice and its value? Where did these fears and beliefs come from? For many, the roots of silence lie in childhood. Perhaps you were taught to be seen and not heard, or you were punished for expressing your emotions. Maybe you learned early on that your needs were less important than the needs of others. These experiences shape your subconscious beliefs about speaking up, and they don't disappear just because you grow up. The work here is to identify and challenge these beliefs. For example, if you believe that your voice doesn't matter, ask yourself, is this really true? Has there ever been a time when your words made a difference, even in a small way? If you believe that speaking up will lead to conflict or rejection, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And more importantly, what's the cost of staying silent? The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization, here it is, the moment of reckoning, the culmination of everything we've explored. The ultimate truth about silence is not just about what it costs us or how to break free from it. It's about something far deeper, far more transformative. It's about understanding that silence is not just a personal choice. It's a reflection of how we see ourselves in the grand tapestry of existence. The final realization is this: your voice is not just a part of you, it is you. It is the essence of your being, the expression of your soul, the bridge between your inner world and the outer reality. When you silence yourself, you are not just withholding words, you are denying your existence. You are saying, in the most profound way possible, that you do not matter. But here's the truth: you do matter, not because of what you achieve, or how you're perceived, or how you're perceived. You matter because you exist. Your voice? You matter because you exist. Your voice. Your thoughts, your feelings, they are not incidental. They are integral to the fabric of reality. Every time you speak, you are affirming your existence, declaring your presence, asserting your right to be here. This is not just a philosophical idea, it's a scientific one. Quantum physics tells us that reality is not fixed. It is shaped by observation, by interaction, by participation. In other words, the universe responds to your presence. When you speak, when you act, when you engage, you are not just a passive observer. You are an active participant in the creation of reality. Think about that for a moment. Your voice has the power to shape reality, not just your personal reality, but the reality of those around you. When you speak your truth, you create ripples that extend far beyond yourself. You inspire others to do the same. You challenge the status quo. You contribute to the collective evolution of humanity. This is why silence is so insidious. It's not just a personal loss, it's a collective one. Every time you stay quiet, you deprive the world of your unique perspective, your creativity, your humanity, and in doing so, you perpetuate a culture of silence, a world where only certain voices are heard and only certain truths are told. But here's the good news. You have the power to change this. You have the power to break the cycle, to reclaim your voice, to contribute to a world where everyone's voice is valued. And the first step is to recognize the profound truth that your voice matters, not because of what it says, but because of what it represents. Your voice is your birthright. It is your gift to the world. It is the tool through which you create, connect, and contribute. And when you use it, you are not just speaking for yourself. You are speaking for all those who have been silenced, for all those who have been told they don't matter. This is the ultimate act of rebellion, to use your voice, not just for yourself, but for the collective. To speak up, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. To take up space not just for your own sake, but for the sake of others. And as you do this, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see yourself differently. You begin to see yourself differently. You begin to see your voice not as a burden, but as a gift. You begin to understand that your words have power, that your presence has meaning, that your existence has purpose. This is the final, most powerful realization. You are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. Your voice, your presence, your existence, they are part of something much larger than yourself. And when you embrace this truth, you step into the fullness of who you are covered. So let me leave you with this. The next time you feel the urge to stay quiet, remember this truth. Remember that your voice matters. Remember that your existence matters. Remember that you are not just a passive observer. You are an active participant in the creation of reality. And then, speak your truth, speak your heart, speak your soul, because the world needs your voice, and more importantly, you need your voice. And more importantly, you need your voice. This is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning, because now you know the truth, and the truth will set you free.